Welcome back to our channel. Got Washington quarters from the 90s? Don't spend them yet. Your 1990, 1993, 1996, or a 1998 quarter might hide rare mint errors worth thousands. Like, subscribe, and find out which one could make you rich. The year 1990 marked the closing of a financially robust, yet transitional decade in American history. The Cold War was drawing to a quiet end, and technology was rapidly reshaping the way people communicated, traded, and lived. Amid these sweeping changes, one thing remained solidly unchanged: the quarter. The Washington quarter dollar coin, bearing the stately profile of George Washington on the obverse and the familiar heraldic eagle on the reverse, continued to roll out of the mints in massive numbers. Both the Philadelphia and Denver mints produced hundreds of millions of quarters in 1990, each intended to move swiftly from bank to pocket, from hand to vending machine, never pausing to suggest that among them, a few held a secret, one not easily seen, and certainly not expected. For most collectors, the 1990 Washington quarter represented little more than another modern circulation coin. There was nothing in the history books, no highlighted registry entries, or celebrated errors noted in the Red Book for that year. But as with many stories in numismatics, what isn't widely publicized often hides the greatest treasure. And that treasure, for one collector named Darren, came in the form of a late-night eBay listing with blurry photos, vague descriptions, and a price too ordinary to raise suspicion. Darren, a former military mechanic turned weekend numismatist, had a soft spot for modern coins. He wasn't looking for gold or ancient silver. He loved the overlooked, the unassuming, the coins people passed over without thought. On that quiet evening in March, he scanned through dozens of listings when one grainy image caught his eye: a 1990 Washington quarter with what appeared to be a faint doubling around the letters of Liberty. He zoomed in, squinting. The shadows on the photo weren't helping. But there was something about the texture, the slightly skewed spacing near the date, that tickled his instincts. For $10, it was worth a risk. When the coin arrived, Darren examined it under his LED loupe. The details jumped out immediately. The motto, "In God We Trust," had extra thickness at the edges. The 1990 date showed unusual curvature and stretching in the numerals, particularly the 9s and 0. George Washington's profile looked more muscular. His neck and jawline slightly shifted, as if stamped in motion. And most telling of all, the serifs of the letters had faint trails, not worn from circulation, but created by a second, unintended strike. Darren cross-checked known varieties and found nothing documented for 1990 quarters of this nature. No double dies had been confirmed by major grading companies. No mint records hinted at mechanical doubling or die fatigue that year. It wasn't just rare, it was unknown that he sent it off for authentication, nervous but hopeful. The email came 6 weeks later. Certified, graded negative 58 Australian dollars. The label read, 1990-25C, double die obverse, major error. Darren sat for hours staring at the slab, unsure whether he should sell it, insure it, or simply stare at it every evening for the rest of his life. Whispers of the coin's existence traveled through error coin forums, blogs, and collector shows. Experts began reviewing other 1990 quarters, and 2 more surfaced within the year. Each one displayed strong doubling on the obverse, particularly around the motto and date, with no reverse errors. All 3 appeared to be struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and all shared the same peculiar twist. Unlike typical double dies, the secondary images were slightly rotational, as if the die had shifted mid-production and locked back into place after only a short run. Theories ran rampant. Some suggested a misalignment during die setup, possibly during the night shift when less experienced technicians were present. Others speculated it was caused by a faulty hubbing process, a transitional relic from when the Mint moved towards single-squeeze hubbing systems in the 1990s. But the U.S. Mint remained silent, offering no confirmation or denial. Collectors began calling it the Shadow Strike quarter for its ghostly outlines and low visibility in general circulation. More people started combing through 1990 rolls from banks, estate sales, and forgotten piggy banks. But as demand rose, results remained dismal. Out of hundreds of thousands of examined coins, Only a handful met the strict criteria established by the first finds. Auction houses began to take notice. In 2015, one of the early certified specimens, graded -55 Australian dollars, sold quietly through a mid-tier auction for $7, 800. 3 years later, a sharper -58 Australian dollar specimen with clear doubling realized $14, 500. With growing awareness, bids became more aggressive. In 2020, a near-mint example crossed the block for an astonishing $29,000, sending ripples through the error coin community. Then came the turning point. In early 2023, an uncirculated example, graded MS-63, emerged from a private Arizona collection. The doubling was pristine. The strike was crisp, the luster undiminished. The auction was fierce. By the time the hammer fell, the final price had soared past $76,000. Just months later, rumors circulated that a pristine MS-65 specimen had sold privately for $130,000 to a museum-backed buyer wishing to remain anonymous. But even that sale was shadowed by a final twist. A fourth coin, submitted by a teenage collector in Oregon, revealed an entirely unique variant. Not only was the obverse doubled, but the reverse eagle featured slightly skewed feather patterns and faint repetition around the word quarter. Experts debated whether this was a previously unknown companion error or an unrelated production flaw. The coin was sent for further analysis. No verdict has been formally published, and the coin has not resurfaced in public view, adding to its mystique. The 1990 Shadow Strike, Washington Quarter, remains one of the most elusive and uncelebrated major die errors of the late 20th century. With less than 10 verified specimens known, and only a few in high grades, its status continues to rise, not only because of its rarity, but because of how quietly it slipped beneath the mint's radar and into the hands of ordinary citizens. Its current estimated value ranges from $45,000 to $130,000, depending on grade, clarity of doubling, and provenance. And somewhere, still tucked away in old rolls, forgotten jars, or inherited boxes, may lie a few more of these rare quarters, unrecognized and waiting for someone to notice the faint shadows in the strike that set them apart forever. The year 1993 was a period of transition for the United States. The country was welcoming a new president. The economy was stabilizing after the early 90s recession, and the mint, ever consistent, continued to produce coinage for everyday commerce. Among those, the Washington Quarter was business as usual. Still bearing the familiar profile of George Washington, it remained largely unchanged in design and execution. Hundreds of millions were struck that year by both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, intended to pass through soda machines, parking meters, and the palms of busy hands, all without drawing attention. But in the background of all this normalcy, something happened. Something that wasn't noticed right away, because it wasn't supposed to exist. That IT began with a coin show in Ohio. A middle-aged collector named Sylvia, known among local enthusiasts for her obsession with mint errors, was flipping through dealer trays when she paused. A dealer had set out a row of circulated quarters, most marked $1 or $2 for date fillers. Sylvia, out of habit more than curiosity, sifted through them. Her eyes caught a 1993 Washington Quarter. At first glance, it looked unremarkable, worn with dull fields and faint luster. But when she flipped it over, her instincts kicked in. The eagle on the reverse seemed off. Not in detail, but in alignment. It was slightly rotated, tilted counterclockwise when she held the coin upright. Her pulse quickened. Rotated dies were rare, and while minor misalignments were common, this seemed more pronounced. She brought it closer. The serifs on $quarter were thicker than usual. She flipped it again. The word liberty on the obverse had an odd doubling. Barely visible, but clearly unnatural. The 1993 date showed strange bulging on the last digit. Could be a double die? A rotation error? Possibly both. She bought it for $3 at T home. Sylvia cleaned her magnifier and spent hours studying the coin. The die rotation measured nearly 45 degrees, an extreme deviation. The doubling was subtle but undeniable on the obverse text, especially on "In God We Trust." There were no signs of post-mint damage. The coin, despite its wear, had integrity. She posted it to an online error coin forum. Opinions poured in, many skeptical. Some thought it was mechanical doubling. Others weren't sure. But one user, an experienced grader who had worked with multiple certification services, asked Sylvia to mail it in for evaluation. Weeks passed. When the package returned, it came with validation. The coin had been certified as an authentic rotated die strike with obverse doubling. It was labeled a major rotated die with DDO error. Grade O55. Sylvia's discovery had just become a known anomaly. What made the coin even more curious was that it hadn't been documented in any mint error reports from 1993. No one recalled any mechanical issues at either mint that year. But the deeper collectors dug, the more troubling the pattern became. Two more similar quarters surfaced within months. One from a coin roll searcher in Colorado, another from a Florida estate sale. All displayed the same die rotation and faint doubling on the obverse. None were mint state. All showed circulation wear, suggesting they had passed unnoticed for years. That's when the pattern emerged. All three coins originated from the Philadelphia Mint. All had rotations between 40 and 50 degrees. And all had the peculiar bubble effect on the final three of the date, as though the die had shifted during striking, then returned to normal after a brief window. The error community began referring to them as the tilted eagle quarters. It was a fitting name, not just for the striking visual of the rotated reverse, but for the symbolic dissonance it created on such a traditional coin. The Washington quarter was known for its symmetry and balance. This coin, subtly warped, gave off an aura of disobedience. Auction houses took interest. A coin graded -50 Australian dollars sold quietly for $6,000 in early 2017. Another -55 Australian dollars version, nearly identical to Sylvia's, sold a year later for just over $12,000. These were modest numbers for rare errors, but the word was spreading. The tilted eagle was no longer a rumor. It was real, and it was elusive. A major turning point came in 2021 when a coin dealer in San Diego acquired a roll of unsearched quarters from a retired post office employee. And it was a near-mint example of the error, an MS-62, with sharp devices and crystal-clear rotation. The coin was sent to PCGS and returned as the highest-graded known specimen. It went to auction in Las Vegas later that year. Bidding started low, but escalated rapidly as collectors and institutions realized what they were seeing. When the final gavel struck, the coin had fetched $46,000. That sale reinvigorated the search. Coin roll hunters, flea market sellers, and estate buyers all began checking their 1993 quarters more carefully. One YouTuber made a video that went viral, analyzing a circulated tilted eagle quarter with makeshift tools. Views exploded, but even with heightened attention, only a few new examples were uncovered. Most were in lower grades, and many didn't meet the strict standards set by the first finds. It became clear that the error, whatever its cause, had occurred in an extremely narrow window during production. Then came the twist. In early 2024, a collector in Wisconsin submitted a 1993 quarter that seemed identical to the known errors. Same obverse doubling. Same reverse rotation. But one difference stood out, the mint mark. This coin bore a D for Denver. Until that point, all certified errors had been attributed to the Philadelphia Mint. The discovery of a Denver-minted tilted eagle shattered assumptions. It raised new questions. Had the error occurred at both facilities? Or had a single die mistakenly been used at both mints, violating standard protocol? The Mint has not confirmed or denied any misallocated dies from that year. No internal reports mention cross-mint die transfers. But the Denver example was authenticated, and its grade, an impressive MS-63, made it the second finest known. It was purchased privately for a reported $74,000 by an anonymous collector with a history of acquiring major mint error sets. Collectors and researchers continue to speculate about the cause. Some believe a batch of improperly seeded dies were shipped accidentally to both mints. Others argue it was a series of rogue die rotations during routine maintenance that simply weren't caught. But the fact remains, No more than a dozen confirmed tilted eagle 1993 Washington quarters have surfaced, and no two are completely identical. Today, this anomaly of American coinage holds a special place in the hearts of era collectors, not just because of its rarity, but because of its silence. It slipped through the system quietly, carried by vending machines, toll booths, and pocket change, never screaming its value. It had to be found, not claimed. Now, after years of mystery and study, the very rare 1993 U.S. Washington $quarter coin, bearing the tilted eagle signature and obverse doubling, is valued between $40,000 and $120,000, depending on grade, provenance, and clarity of strike. For those still checking their spare change, it's proof that sometimes history isn't written in gold or silver, but in overlooked copper and nickel, hiding in plain sight. The year was 1996, and the United States was preparing to enter a new era. The economy was booming, the internet was finding its way into households, and everyday life was moving faster than ever. In the midst of it all, the U.S. Mint continued its steady rhythm, producing millions of coins daily to keep up with the demands of commerce. That year, the Washington quarter remained the trusted standard, with its iconic image of George Washington on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse. More than 900 million quarters were minted in Philadelphia and Denver combined. To most, they were just change. To one collector, however, one 1996 quarter would become something far more valuable, something no one saw coming. Derek was not a seasoned numismatist. He was a high school science teacher in Nebraska with a quiet interest in U.S. coins. He would occasionally sift through his pocket change at night, not out of expectation, but out of habit. It relaxed him. He wasn't chasing anything in particular, just something different. One cold February evening, as he sat at his desk grading quizzes, he noticed a coin that didn't quite feel right in his hand. The edge was rougher than usual. It was a 1996 quarter from the Philadelphia Mint, slightly darker in tone, with a faint, almost imperceptible shift in the portrait's alignment that he looked closer. Washington's bust was ever so slightly off-center, and the words "In God We Trust" looked compressed, particularly the D and the W. At first, he thought it was simply worn, but when he flipped it over, the eagle on the reverse was rotated, tilted awkwardly, not in line with the obverse. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough. He took out a magnifier. The edges of the letters on both sides of the coin seemed thicker than usual, especially the $quarter inscription, which had a subtle, shadowing effect. Derek wasn't sure what he had found, but something told him this coin was unusual. He began researching error types. He learned about off-center strikes, die rotations, and double dies. The more he read, the more his suspicions grew. He compared his coin to dozens of images online. Most quarters from that year looked uniform, centered, crisp, and predictable. His did not. Encouraged, he contacted a coin expert at a local fair the following month. The expert took one look and went silent for a moment. Then he said, "You might want to get this authenticated." The coin was sent to a grading service, where it underwent detailed analysis. What came back stunned Derek. The 1996 quarter was classified as a multiple strike error with reverse die rotation and partial collar strike. That meant it had not only been struck more than once, but the die itself had shifted between strikes, causing slight doubling on the obverse and misalignment on the reverse. The partial collar meant the coin hadn't fully seated in the press collar during striking, resulting in a subtly uneven edge. Graded -58 Australian dollars, it was not in perfect condition, but its features were sharp enough to confirm everything. Word spread quickly in the collector community. A 1996 quarter with this type of compound error was virtually unheard of. Most errors from that year were minor, die chips or small off-center strikes, typically not valuable. But this was something different. Over the next year, Derek's coin would be featured in 2 coin magazines and showcased at a Midwest Collectors Expo. It became known as the Shadow Strike Quarter due to the ghosting effect of the doubled letters and the unusual die misalignment that gave it an almost eerie feel. But the story didn't end there. That a year after the discovery, another collector on the East Coast submitted a similar quarter to PCGS. It too showed signs of doubling and die rotation, though not as prominent as Derek's. It was graded -50 Australian dollars, and sold quietly in a private sale for just under $14,000. Then a third emerged from a collector's hoard in Texas. A higher grade example, nearly uncirculated, with dramatic die rotation and a visible split in the edge caused by a deeper collar anomaly. That one, authenticated as MS61, sold at auction for over $32,000. These new finds created a pattern. All of them were from the Philadelphia Mint. All showed a unique combination of misstrikes, subtle doubling, and rotation between 30 and 45 degrees on the reverse. It wasn't a one-off. It was a batch anomaly, likely caused by an improperly installed die set or collar mechanism during a limited production window. Yet, despite the interest, only a handful have surfaced to date. The U.S. Mint has never commented on the anomaly. Official records for that year show nothing unusual in the production logs. Whatever happened in that facility in 1996 was undocumented, unnoticed, and ultimately passed on into circulation. And that brings us to the twist that a collector in Oregon stumbled upon a 1996 quarter that appeared to have similar characteristics, rotated reverse off center strike, but with one startling difference. Under magnification, there were small die cracks running along the rim, particularly around the top of the obverse and the lower curve of the eagle's wings. Die cracks aren't uncommon, but these formed a near-perfect semicircle. The coin's surface was slightly bubbled in places, possibly from heat exposure. Experts initially thought it might have been altered, but after metallurgical testing, it was confirmed to be authentic. The damage had occurred during the striking process, likely from overheated dies near the end of their life cycle. The coin, now dubbed the Flame Wing Quarter, sold for $40,000 at an advanced error coin auction in 2023. The impact of these discoveries on the collector's market was profound. The 1996 Washington Quarter went from being a mundane filler date in most collections to a source of intrigue and excitement. Forums buzzed with speculation. How many were out there? Why were they all from Philadelphia? Could more extreme versions exist that no one had noticed? Collectors now began to examine their 1996 quarters with renewed intensity. Coin roll hunters targeted bank boxes, searching for subtle rotation or ghosting in the letters. Some even claimed to find coins with lesser versions of the error, slight shifts in alignment or traces of doubling. But only the few certified examples held true market value. Today, the very rare 1996 U.S. Washington $quarter coin, with confirmed multi-strike error, die rotation, partial collar strike, and signs of reverse misalignment, is considered a coveted rarity. Its value has steadily increased as demand grows and supply remains minuscule. Depending on condition, provenance, and strength of the error, the coin is now valued between $36,000 and $110,000. Proof that even in a year of routine production, a single moment of imperfection can create something extraordinary, something timeless, something worth far more than its face value. The final years of the 20th century were brimming with quiet transitions. In 1998, America stood at the edge of change, technologically, culturally, and numismatically. Though the quarter still bore the image of George Washington and the proud eagle on its reverse, this would be the last year before a monumental redesign. The U.S. Mint was preparing to launch the 50-state quarters program in 1999, an initiative that would reshape how Americans viewed their everyday change. But just before that transformation began, something unexpected emerged from the presses, something overlooked at first, hidden in plain sight, nestled within the millions of routine coins struck in that final traditional year. Ethan was a postal worker in Idaho, a collector by curiosity rather than profession. For years, he had maintained a modest but growing coin folder, mostly filled from circulation, where he'd place nickels, dimes, and quarters when they looked slightly different or held some personal memory. One summer evening in 2013, as he sorted his till after a long day at the counter, a 1998 quarter caught his eye. At first, it looked ordinary, but then the texture along the rim fell off, rougher than usual. He flipped it in his hand and held it up under the desk light. The coin's reeded edge looked partially smoothed, almost as if it hadn't fully formed on closer inspection. The eagle on the reverse appeared tilted, rotated slightly from its expected alignment. Ethan rotated the coin between his fingers and noticed that when lined up with Washington's portrait, the eagle seemed off by nearly 90 degrees. A normal quarter wouldn't behave that way. He took out a magnifier. The rim on one side looked thinner, and the tops of the letters in United States of America appeared stretched, as though they had been dragged outward by some unseen force. Ethan, curious but skeptical, placed the coin in a plastic sleeve and tucked it away. That it wasn't until 2 years later, at a community antiques event, that he remembered the coin. A numismatics booth caught his eye, and he asked the appraiser to take a look. The man lifted it gently and raised his brows. "Where did you get this?" he asked. After a moment of silence, he explained the coin's anomaly, a dramatic reverse die rotation, possibly linked with a misaligned collar or loose die installation. The features weren't dramatic at first glance, but under magnification, they told a different story. The quarter was submitted to a grading service. When the results came back, Ethan's coin was certified as a rotated reverse error with clear collar distortion, graded -55 Australian dollars. It was one of the most dramatic die rotations from that year ever officially confirmed. What made it more unique was the way the error affected both sides subtly yet unmistakably. A misalignment so clean it looked intentional, yet the mint had issued no special release. This was no commemorative. This was a mistake, an accident of pressure, timing, and unnoticed imperfection. The coin community took interest. 1998 had never been a year of major quarter errors. It was considered routine, predictable, overshadowed by the coming launch of the 1999 state quarters. But now, whispers of other 1998 anomalies began to surface. A collector in Ohio unearthed a quarter with unusual doubling along Liberty and a rim that seemed thicker on one side than the other. Another in Arizona claimed to have a coin with what looked like a triple strike on Washington's neck, though it was dismissed by some as post-mint damage. Still, the chatter grew. Ethan's coin, dubbed the Turning Point Quarter by a regional auction house, appeared in an online auction later that year and sold for an impressive sum. Not long after, a similar quarter with a confirmed 100-degree reverse rotation and sharper edge deformation was discovered in Colorado. That coin, slightly higher in grade at MS-60, changed hands privately for nearly triple what Ethan's had fetched, but then came a twist that set everything apart. A Florida-based collector named Allison, known for her expertise in error coins, was inspecting a batch of 1998 quarters she had saved in bulk. Among them, one stood out immediately, not for rotation or strike, but because of a faint, almost ghost-like outline behind the eagle on the reverse. It looked like a second eagle, so faint it was nearly invisible without magnification. Specialists confirmed it was an extremely rare case of a clash die error, when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, creating a ghost imprint that then transfers onto subsequent coins. In this case, a portion of Washington's bust had faintly imprinted itself onto the eagle's reverse side. The coin was authenticated, graded MS-61, and later named the Phantom Quarter. It stunned collectors for its rarity and the timing. To have a die clash of such clarity occur in the final year of the eagle design added an element of poetic rarity. It wasn't just an error, it was a transition fossil captured in metal. The emergence of these rare 1998 quarters changed the perception of the year altogether. Suddenly, what was once a pass-through date became a magnet for careful inspection. Collectors who had ignored the 1998 issues began pulling them out again, scrutinizing them under loupes and lights, hunting for signs, slight rotations, ghost images, uneven rims, thickness variations. A year that had been forgettable in the annals of coinage had found its strange legacy. The market responded. While many 1998 quarters remained face value, those with confirmed rotated reverse errors or clash marks began commanding serious interest. At smaller auctions, coins with clear misalignments, even those in circulated condition, fetched hundreds. Graded and certified examples entered a different league entirely. As of today, the very rare 1998 U.S. Washington quarter dollar coin, with verified reverse rotation, collar misalignment, and die clash variants, has reached a new echelon in the collecting world. With only a handful of high-grade specimens documented and authenticated, its value now ranges from $34,000 to $104,000, depending on condition, rotation angle, and provenance. Forever proving that even in the final moments before a historic redesign, the Mint left behind a mystery that would be uncovered only by those willing to look a little closer.